Paula Le Dieu, one of the MD of Magic Lantern. Magic Lantern, I think, has become a really major name now. It's one of those that we associate when thinking about open media and thinking about new media issues at the moment.
I've spent most of the last probably 7 years at events, something like this, where usually it involved my forehead against a brick wall a lot of the time. And I'm having one of those moments today where I sort of feel the wall crumbling down in front of me. So I apologise a little bit if I feel a little off balance. And I'm really going to try not to be adversarial out of habit. But, you know, when you have somebody like Peter Buckingham standing up and making a fantastic speech this morning that really addresses some of the pointy ends of the film industry, I kind of feel like the Pope's just delivered my sermon. So I'm going to kind of do my best and see how we go. And as I say, I'll try not to kind of be too adversarial out of habit, because I kind of feel like we're all singing off the same hymn sheet. Oh, and the other thing I wanted to say is, who else wants to go to WIPO and hear them deliver that speech to those folks? I do. That's awesome. I actually am going to try and be really, really practical for about 10 minutes and talk about the toolkits. Many of us sort of have our toolkits. I'm not a tool maker, but I do make things. And some of those things in the toolkits we completely take for granted, and sometimes we forget to open the toolkit and reevaluate it every now and again and check out whether we've actually got the best possible tools to help us do exactly what it is we want to do and to make the things that we want to make. And so the sort of the filmmaker's toolkit, or the creator's toolkit, is usually a pretty varied one. We hope that there's a very, very big dollop of talent in that toolkit, because that helps a whole hell of a lot. It's not all you need, but we hope that's there. So for purposes of today, we're going to assume that all of us are fabulous storytellers. So we'll take that one as read. But then I think as filmmakers, we also have in our toolkit relationships. A key part of what we do when we're trying to get films made, or we're trying to get anything in the creative industries made, are the relationships we have. Who do we know? Who can help us? Who can connect us with the right people? Who can connect us with talent? Who are the talent that we know? Who can help us along the way? Other sort of tools that we have in there are ones that, you know, some of us are less interested in and others are more interested in. Things like processes, things like systems, things like different models, business models, marketing models, distribution models, rights models, standard contracts, all of those kinds of things. We also have within our toolkit things like reputation. Where are we on the reputational scale? We're constantly sort of trying to evaluate and grow that typically. And we also have things like passion and drive and motivation, all of which hopefully live in your toolkit. What I want to talk about a little bit today is how some of those tools are changing in the digital age, and how tools that you might have thought were not as important, or that you haven't looked at for quite a long time, are definitely worth another look. And hopefully this afternoon you'll hear a lot of examples of people who've done that in a very radical way and are really rethinking the way that they use the tools available to them. The first one I want to touch on, and actually Sarah touched on a little bit, is actually passion. I think for many of us, the passion we feel about a particular story is often profound. It's what actually gets us out of bed in the morning. It's what actually gets us knocking on doors, trying to get help to make and tell the story that we want to tell. I think frequently, however, we feel as if often it's a disadvantage sometimes. I know myself, I'd like to be more dispassionate sometimes about what I want to do and the stories I want to tell. I've been extremely restrained, and some of you will notice that I'm planting my hands on the rostrum. It's because usually they do this, and the people filming get really cross with me. So I'm trying very hard. But it's that arm-waving passion that frequently is something that we think it kind of is a bit of a tell. We don't actually want people to know just how strongly we feel about this, particularly when we're talking to the financiers. We want them to think we're business people. We know what we're doing, and we're not going to make passionate decisions. I think one of the things that you recognise in the digital age is that passion actually becomes everything. Because that passion is what connects you to your audiences. When there's no one between you and your audiences, That's what engages them. And again, I think the Four-Eyed Monsters is such a fantastic example of this. It's that personal storytelling and passion that engages your audiences with you. And I think it's one of those sort of things in our toolkits. It's definitely worth a bit of an airing and a rethink about how you engage directly with audiences. And again, just to reiterate, passion is definitely the key in my opinion. I think the other sort of new tools I'm going to talk about are not nearly so prosaic. So bear with me here, folks. I'm going to go straight into the rights discussion. I should do a little background here. Part of the reason that I was frequently putting my forehead against brick walls for a long period of time was that I was one of the evangelists, of the tent-raising, travelling around the world kind of evangelist. I worked for an organisation called Creative Commons. I was the founding director of iCommons, which is the international arm of Creative Commons. And I'm going to talk a little bit today about Creative Commons, very much in the same vein, just as another thing to put in your toolkit. Something to keep in mind that might help you in terms of thinking about your rights and how you want to give those away or retain those, and also, again, how it might be able to help you as a marketing and distribution tool. I want to start by just asking very quickly, who's heard of Creative Commons? See? Walls crumbling in front of me. Can't tell you how many years I did that and everyone would go. Who's used Creative Commons? Wow, that's even better. So I am not going to labour this then. Many of you know what it is. But very briefly, Creative Commons is simply a licence, as in a standard piece of writing that's in legal speak that allows you to talk to people about the rights you want to retain and the rights that you want to share in your creative work. It's that simple. That's all it is. It is literally a bunch of very geeky lawyers in America. We heard actually a quote from Lawrence Lessig, he was certainly one of them, who decided that they could use their lawyer powers for good for a moment. And they sat down and they created a set of legal documents that are just licenses that literally modularized copyright. So essentially what it did was that they looked at copyright law, and they've done this now, I haven't done a check lately, but last time I checked it was in about 60 countries, so 60 different legal systems. They've looked at copyright law, they've broken it into its component parts. Copyright law actually embraces quite a broad spectrum of different rights. They've modularized that, and they've created an online system that allows you to pick and choose which modules you want to apply to your content. For example, you might decide that you are completely happy having your creative work distributed online, shared with as many people as can possibly get their sticky little hands on it. You are quite happy for that to happen, but you want to retain commercial exploitation rights exclusively for yourself. In other words, anyone who has a copy of your work cannot commercially exploit it. They can't go and then make money out of that, but they can share that around as many times as they want. They can pass it on to their friends, they can post it, they can do what they would like with it. So what they've done is they've separated out the economic right from the copy right, if you like. Again, I'm not going to go through them all. In summary, 6 licenses. The 6 licenses essentially are a kind of mix and match grab of those different modules and allow you to really think about what is the best way for the most number of people to see your work in a way that works for your piece of your creative work. Why is this important? Well, I think we've heard a lot already about the capacity for the internet to be able to connect you directly with audiences. I've talked about it, Peter referred to it, Sarah, and definitely YouTube and Without a Box is also very much in that space where it's recognising, in fact, and Ira did very well this morning as well, talk about cutting out the middleman, being able to engage directly with your audiences. And what the Creative Commons licenses allow you to do is to define a relationship with your audiences that doesn't necessarily require you to speak to every single one of them when they want to do something with your work. So what you're essentially doing is you're empowering your audience to become part of your distribution network. You're empowering your audience to potentially become part of your creative collaborative network. Because one of the other things that you can do with Creative Commons licenses is you can release the right for people to be able to take your word and cut it up. Do something different with it. Take a part of your work and incorporate it into their work. For some of us, that's quite radical. For others of us, that feels completely natural. The point being is that you start to be able to have a relationship again with collaborators, with audiences, that empowers them to do something with your work that can in turn bring benefit back to you and that work. The most obvious one, of course, is just eyeballs. It's beating the obscurity problem. It's making sure that actually as many people as possible actually see what you have made. And I come back to Peter's point earlier today, which is the very, very best of films is, frankly, not anything unless somebody sees it. And so, one of the greatest battles that independent filmmakers have is obscurity. How on earth do we get more people to see the work that we make? And I think Creative Commons is a way. I don't want to labour this because I think there's lots of other sort of mechanisms that are in play to do the same thing. Really what I'm trying to do is use Creative Commons as an example of some things you really should be looking at in that toolkit so that when you're thinking about your film, you start to make some decisions about how you think you are going to get that to an audience in a way that makes sense for you from a business perspective, but also from a creative reward perspective. How am I just going to get people to see this? I think also the interesting thing with Creative Commons is that they've just tacked in onto the back of the licensing system a commercial realisation component, which essentially allows you to do, it's a very fancy way of just saying, it allows you to link back to a payment service. So if, for example, you want to distribute under non-commercial, but you want to make it really simple for people to be able to connect with you, again, should they want to use it for commercial purposes. So all we're doing there is just closing that loop. The work is spreading around, somebody sees your film, they want to use a part of it, or they want to screen it, or for whatever commercial purposes they want to make of that film, they can connect straight back into a commercial connection with you. So that's one sort of toolkit that I wanted to talk about. The other one that I wanted to very, very quickly touch on, and again, I feel like sort of the radical edge has been taken off this slightly, is just talk about DRM. Actually, does everybody know what DRM is? Oh, okay. Yeah. So DRM is a geek acronym for digital rights management. We could roll through all of the acronyms. There's TPMs, there's DRMs, there's a whole bunch more. Essentially, it's a technology. Okay, we could argue this one all afternoon, so bear with me here. I'm just going to go for a really simplistic description. It's a technology sort of barrier or a technology envelope that exists around content, and that envelope defines how you can use the content. One of the things that I just want to say, and again, it's been said, it's worth repeating, is again, DRM, TPMs, any kind of technical protection are barriers. It doesn't matter how you cut it, they are a hurdle between your work and your audience. Sometimes those hurdles are necessary. Most times, I would argue they are not. And the reason that I sort of often finish my talks by saying this is, again, I come back to sort of the independent filmmaker. My background is much more in the documentary space, where if it's all possible, the problem is even more acute in terms of getting audiences to actually see your work. You just don't want to be putting barriers between your work and your audiences. Find a way to realise a business model that celebrates your audience's desire to see your work. Do not punish them for wanting to see your work. And more often than not, digital rights management systems make your audience's work very, very hard to actually watch or consume your work. I would point to the BBC's iPlayer experience. Has anybody tried to access the iPlayer? Yeah, see, the giggles say it all. It's a really, really difficult process, and frankly, as somebody who pays a license fee, I feel like I'm being punished for wanting to actually consume the content that I'm paying to have made. And in your case, you just want people to enjoy and celebrate your work. You need to welcome them to that work rather than put barriers in place. Again, I don't want to be too didactic about this, but all I would really encourage you to do is, again, when you're thinking about the tools that are at your disposal, make sure that you do not take for granted when somebody says this is the right tool. It's a time of transition. It's a time for re-evaluating the tools that you have at your disposal. So in summary, passion is on the up. Evaluating all of the tools, all of your standard contracts, all of your norms, also on the up. Confusion, also on the up. First to admit it. Thank you very much.